Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us this morning, 22nd of January, 2022. My God. Yeah, time flies. So anyhow, thanks again for joining us and taking your time on a Saturday morning. We were having some discussion around the idea of how the CROs can report back to the neighborhood councils on their priorities. So we can go into that, but I just wanted to establish where we had left off. Jesse, we left off at the talking about we pretty much have finished the part that related to the CROs and what kind of experience they should have. So if we're all happy with that, then we can go ahead and move on to the CROs section B, roles and responsibilities. Is that correct, Jesse?
Yes.
Okay, so talking about section B, as you can all see there, this is the general outline of what CROs will be responsible for. So if this all looks good to you, the 1 through, and we have an addition at the end of this. Are the highlighted ones additions, Jesse? The gold ones, the 7, 8, 10, and 11?
No, 10 and 11 are new based on 10 is from our last meeting, 11 is from just this morning.
Okay.
I think 7 and 8 are highlights from Mariano about questions. I just want to also give people a bit of an overview about how this section works. The first part, roles and responsibilities, discusses in general what we want our CROs to be doing. And then section 2 talks about how they may, the specific details of how it is that they may do that. Still not so specific as to identify, go to this block, or meet, but with additional detail about how to satisfy those general responsibilities.
So the number 7 and 8 were points that Mariano brought up. Mariano, do you want to speak to those?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I'm going to need to sometimes have my video on and off because of connectivity issues. So I hope you guys don't mind. Yeah, so 7, leading targeted enforcement projects. I see this as almost a patrol issue, and I don't see this as a CRO primary responsibility. So I had a question. What does that mean? When are we asking? When is this? Does this policy ask CROs to lead targeted projects, and what are targeted enforcement projects? And 8 is kind of the same, coordinated enforcement efforts with CRT with other personnel. What does that mean? I just had questions. What does that mean?
Well, in my mind, it had to do with given that there's and let's use my analogy again, or my example of a drug house, and it's a serious enough issue that it rose to the level of being a priority, and in the taking of that priority of the drug house through the SARA process, it was identified that, or it was determined that there should be some enforcement that could take any number of forms, and I would
see that. Excuse me. I see that we also have 2 hands up, Jose. Just so you know, Lieutenant Fable
Okay.
and Creighton.
Okay, so I'll just finish my comment and we'll go to who's up first, Creighton or Lieutenant Fable.
No idea.
Okay.
Probably Lieutenant Fable.
Okay, I'll call on the lieutenant in a second. So my concept of this was that given that the CRO would be the one most familiar with the issue in terms of a project or a priority, that they would take a lead role in coordinating the efforts of OPD to deal with it in alignment with the what the CRO has developed in terms of the SARA project and how to respond to it. So Lieutenant Febble.
Hey, good morning, everybody. It's good to see everyone. I wanted to just quickly have a brief discussion. We have Joe DeVries who's on the line, but he only has about 20 minutes, and that he has to leave at 10:30 this morning. But Joe and all of our citywide CRO staff, including Deputy Chief Bolton, had a pretty important, profound meeting last week with regard to CRO staffing. And that meeting, I think, really opened the eyes of everybody involved in NSCs and the stakeholders there of what the CRO program staffing wise and our limitations is going to look like for at least 18 months. And I think that is something that we should all be aware of, and it should definitely be reflective of the policy, because I think it's very important that this policy reflect attainable action. And based on our staffing, and Joe will be able to more eloquently describe it, there's a significant portion of what I'm reading that simply the CRO will not be able to do. And if we force them into a policy of accountability and they're unable to attain the measures within the policy, it could become very problematic. So at this time, I'll let Mr. DeVries, talk about the staffing and the challenges that we discussed.
Yeah, hey, good morning. Jose or Jesse, are you okay with me taking the floor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, and I apologize. Lieutenant's right. I have to present the Open Fire Safe Council meeting at 10:30. It's just a conflict. Both meetings just crossed each other. And I may be able to bounce back here, for the last little bit of your meeting. But I did want to highlight this for you guys. We're down to 15 CROs in the new shift. 11 in BFO1 and only 5, pardon me, so 16, only 5 in BFO2. Actually, no, I take that back. It's 11 in 1 and 4 in 2, but one of the ones from BFO1 is going to be shifted to BFO2. So it will end up functionally being 10 and 5. I'm very concerned about it. I'm actually going to alert the city administrator, because I think we need more balance between those two BFOs. I actually think the East needs more than in BFO2 than in BFO1, but I do think there's some union issues there in terms of people getting the assignments that they're allowed, that they sign up for. And I'm not going to get into the intricacies of that, but I am a little worried that as much as I like this policy and as robust as it is, if we lock in a certain number of projects that CROs have to do, or a number of council meetings they have to attend, it could be very difficult for the next year. And I know the Lieutenant said for the next 18 months. I mean, it really depends on the academies and how many people we graduate. And when I think about the debate we had 2 weeks ago about, Reggie very eloquently arguing for more years of experience before someone becomes a CRO, with the force the way it is right now, we're facing a huge challenge. So I think that Lieutenant wanted to make that clear, and I'm hearing it. I'm not sure how they're going to cover even the council meetings that we currently have. So sergeants and lieutenants are going to be covering for CROs at some of these council meetings, because there's just not enough of them to go around.
Okay, well, Creighton, are you done with that? With the
bad news? Yeah. Sorry.
Let's go on to Creighton. I want to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, my comment, and good morning, everybody. And thanks for that update, Lieutenant Febble and Joe. My comment was in response to Mariano's comment about the enforcement actions. I think we've seen in a lot of neighborhood councils when, CROs are kind of blending the line between just sole community resource officers, folks that are just working on dedicated projects, community issues, and then officers that are working on enforcement actions, there's a breakdown in trust, because I think there is a likelihood when an officer is seen as somebody who is conducting enforcement actions, for the community to be distanced from that officer, because then that officer is just like any other officer. And now, to just kind of listening to Joe's update, I mean, I think there's a real question of, like, what is the role of the CRO? What is the viability of the CRO as a position? Because it sounds like, given the staffing constraints, there's going to be no way to avoid CROs from, engaging in traditional enforcement actions when called upon because of the limited officers. So then the question is, what is really distinguishing a CRO from another officer? And then, whether or not, like, how we can, either uplift that that distinguishing factor, or, to Joe's point, not place as many burdens on the CRO position, given the reality at hand.
Thanks, Creighton. Lieutenant Febble, you still have your hand up, and then we'll go to Mariano.
Yes, sir. So, great. That's a great point you bring up, sir. One of the good things that has happened, it wasn't quite reflected yet in the policy, but we have separated the CRTs completely from the CROs. We used to call them special resource section, but they were reallocated to the Violent Crime Operations Center per Chief Armstrong in the beginning of 2021. So we don't have CRTs anymore. So the good news, sir, is that we actually rarely ever engage in direct enforcement projects unless we really are absolutely needed for, like, a search warrant or something of that nature. It's very rare for that to occur. What we do, though, supplement strongly is our patrol division. So that still exists. I hope that's clear to everybody.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Mariano.
Yeah, thank you.
Joe.
That was, and thank you, Creighton. That got to sort of the meat of my concern in raising this question is, just the word enforcement and leading enforcement activities that definitely can, break down the established trust and relationship with the community and police if the CROs are leading these kind of activities. But what I heard Jose respond is follow-up. If it's follow-up on certain activities, or that it's not necessarily enforcement activities, then let's change that word. But I suspect it's not only that. I suspect it's actually referring to, true enforcement activities. So that's my concern with that. And then also, I am even more concerned with this Lieutenant Febble and Joe's statements about capacity, that this policy that we should not, identify or develop activities or policy or definitions of roles for CROs because it's going to put a stress on existing officers or those that are active now. And he mentioned there was 15. And so that concerns me greatly, because our policy and our input in this ad hoc should not be determined by present capacity, or, as mentioned by Joe, is union issues. We should not be concerned with those. I mean, we should be concerned and open to it, but the policies and our intention of developing this community policing policy where it's really going to work, should be based more on creative possibilities, not. So I hope I'm clear on that. This kind of concerns me a little bit. So thank you.
Thanks, Mariano. Joe, and then Lieutenant again.
Yeah, and Mariano, I don't disagree with you. I think a policy should be an aspiration as much as it is a guideline, right? So, like, I do like a lot of the creativity that's been put into it. And, you know, if a policy dictates, you know, specific numbers that may not be attainable now, that could, like, if a policy is written in a way that could immediately put the department in violation of the policy merely by its staffing level, then there's a flaw. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have those more robust aspirations. I just think like further down, there's that 10%, like an officer can, you know, should only be doing other work for 10% of their time. Like, I saw this argument in the 90s, you know, OPD had a really hard time quantifying how long a community policing officer was in their beat. And at the time, Councilmember Russo was you know, literally pounding the desk, you know, the dais, you know, wanting a number. And it was impossible for them to calculate. And so I just, that's all. I'm not saying that you take huge things out of this policy. I'm just saying that when it comes to specific, like, number of projects, percentage of time and beat, that's where I worry about, you know, creating a de facto, you know, compliance problem.
Lieutenant.
You know what? Joe literally just nailed exactly everything that I was going to say. Thank you, Joe.
Did you have any follow-up? I thought I saw your hand up. Well, let me, Joe, do you have something else? Okay, Reggie.
Yeah, I think the key word is aspirational. We don't want to make a policy that fits the status quo, because if the status quo is ideal, we wouldn't be here trying to develop a policy. So, I don't want to also think of the Oakland Police Department to be the same police department it is in 2032. It has to grow. It has to change. It has to evolve. And the first step of the right way of evolution is in policy development. So this is aspirational, and we may not hit it the first year, the first 2 years, but departments grow into effectiveness. And that's what we ought to be thinking right now, futuristically. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Reggie. Go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to join Mariano and Reggie. I think that we're kind of creating a model, and if the OPD current staffing cannot meet this policy model, then that's an argument that the city council needs to provide more staffing to the police department. So we make the model according to what we think it should be. And then if that drives increasing staffing, then it drives increasing staffing. If the model is the most important thing, if accomplishing these things is the most important thing, then staffing should be adjusted to make sure that they can accomplish these things. And they shouldn't be held accountable for not accomplishing them if they don't have adequate staffing.
Thank you, Mike. Paula, good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. So I just want to push back a little bit, having been a manager for years and years and years and years. I find that stating in a policy something that is clearly not possible is a good way to get people to ignore policies. That you really want a policy to reflect what you want people held accountable to be doing. And I personally think that putting in these very hard, by that I mean written in stone kinds of rules, which don't take account of any sort of aspiration written in the policy. It doesn't say this is an aspiration, it says you will do this. And so I think that it would be better to have more realistic policy, one that actually could be attainable. I think it is a wish that the city council would properly fund this. We're having a hard time getting funds for a lot of things. So anyway, I mean, I'm sorry to be a wet blanket, but I really feel that having a more realistic policy is one that is more likely to be followed rather than setting the precedent that we just ignore the policy because we can't do it anyway.
Let's see, Mariano and then the lieutenant.
Yeah, and I don't want to beat this issue, but you know, I don't mind having, you know, I think we're all realistic, and I don't mind being realistic, you know, about little things. You know, if we can have 15 CROs, then, you know, what's the realistic 11? Sure, something like that. I think, you know, I and all of us can be realistic. What I'm referring to is larger, more issues that affect, you know, systemic cultural issues within the police department, and as it affects our community. After all, we are an ad hoc to develop a policy on community policing. So the questions about race, how do officers, you know, deal with de-escalation when it comes to race, and then how is that taken back for general for the general department, you know, those kind of things. And what I don't want is if we start, you know, looking at capacity, you know, dealing with numbers and maybe some budget issues, and it's going to start, you know, infiltrating into the larger, more important issues. And so, you know, I don't want that. And I've already said this in the beginning that, you know, I suspect that OPOA is not going to like probably 90% of this policy. And so, you know, that's where I think that, you know, they can nickel and dime us in terms of, you know, staffing and maybe budget, but it's going to affect the larger issues that, you know, the more political issues, ideological issues that we're all developing. So that's why, you know, if we, so it doesn't really have anything to do with being realistic, you know, because I think we're all realistic, you know, so I just don't want this to get into, you know, the larger, more important issues. Thank you.
Lieutenant, then Reggie, and then Joe.
Hey, so first of all, everybody, I really appreciate everybody's feedback on this really stressful issue for the department. It obviously affects me firsthand, and it makes me feel really good that everybody, it sounds like, truly does understand the challenges that we are facing and is open-minded with regard to that in the policy. One of the things I wanted to know is will this policy address the possibility of leveraging technology? And what I mean by that is that many of our units, like our ceasefire unit, gets an allocated annual budget that allows them to be more efficient. And I say this because recently I fought for and got my teams, all 5 of my future CROs, portable laptops, which allows them to work more efficiently in the field. It also allows them to engage in virtual and in-person meetings simultaneously for those persons who are unable to attend. So it maximizes our efficiency. Would it be possible in this policy to outline potential budgeting for not just training, but actual equipment for our CROs?
I didn't get the last part, Lieutenant.
Apologies. I was asking if this policy could not only allocate funding for training, as we've all noted above, but also technology.
I would say yes. That would be my vote. So yeah, just speaking personally. We got Reggie, Joe, and then Brenda.
This is a philosophical issue that we're going to have to wrestle with going forward. This policy is about change. Change is uncomfortable. No one wants to do it. Departments definitely don't want to do it in law enforcement. They want to do it only when it's comfortable and convenient for how they see the perspective of law enforcement. They're willing to change then. They're willing to do or purchase or buy or employ all kind of defensive tactics, all kind of new innovative equipment, you name it. You know, if it emanates out of the department, change is what they're willing to do. But when the communities decide to say, we want to look in another direction about how you enforce the community, that's when change becomes difficult. And that's when the issue of staffing always come up. Let's be clear about something. I've never seen a police department ever say, we don't need any more officers. We're completely staffed. Every police agency in the United States is understaffed. If you ask them around budget time, they're going to say the same thing. We don't have enough officers. That's immaterial to me. What's material to me is this. What are you doing with the officers that you do have? And how are you efficiently doing that? And who is having the decision about what you're doing with those officers? Should it be just the folks who reside elsewhere and then drive into town and do the work? Or should it be the people who live here and pay taxes and dictate how they want to be policed? That's not an amazing idea. If you go to suburban communities, they have total control over their police agencies. And it's never it's never a buffer. But when you get to diverse urban communities, that's when the struggle comes about. And so, aspirational or not, I'm saying if you work for the city of Oakland and the people say this is the policy we want you to adhere to, it's up to the police managers to make that happen the best way they can. And if you want to work here as a line officer, you have to adhere to the general orders of the place where you work. Or you can go someplace else and work.
Joe and then Brenda.
Thanks. If I could, and I'm so sorry, I do have to hop off after this comment. I will try to come back, but I'm not sure. I mean, wildfire prevention is another important thing I work on, but I think this conversation has been great, and I don't think we actually have to change very much of what's written. If I could call our attention, there's the part about a CRO spending 10% of their, only 10%. It says, oh darn it, I lost the spot. I'm looking on my version of the document, but
I have it on the screen.
Oh, you do? Thanks. Sorry, I'll click back. So I just think like that 10% is something I would take out, like, because it's just 10% is nothing, and you have no idea if a CRO has to respond to a patrol call, and it ends up being, a violent crime has been committed, and they're hung up there, and they spend all day there. They've just spent more than 10% of their work week, on that call. So I just think that number, and then if you scroll down to where up to where you were talking about how many beats a CRO will be assigned, you acknowledge, which I think is great, that I think it's further down. The policy acknowledges that there won't necessarily be a CRO assigned to every beat. Yeah, there it is. So it says, each of the 57 beats may not have a solely dedicated CRO. That's great. I think that's important that you've acknowledged that, because they won't, at least not for the next 18 months. And then further down, you say, no CRO shall not be assigned more than 2 neighborhood councils, with the exception of beat 13. I don't actually have a problem with that. I'd love to hear what the lieutenant has to say, because functionally they really can't. But I think there are some CROs currently doing more than 3 beats or more than 2 beats. But again, so I think that's a minor tinker, like that spot and the 10%. I think those are the only spots where you're locking in a number that could be problematic. I don't think the rest of the policy has anything that prescriptive. So I think you're fine.
Brenda.
I was going to make a couple of points. One is that we just graduated an academy. Another one is expected in a couple of months. The numbers of officers will increase. So we shouldn't be tied to what the current staffing levels are. Staffing levels will come back up. Second, though, I agree with the concept that we should not put in too many things that perhaps can't be accomplished. Maybe for some of that language, we should indicate that the department shall strive to do something that would also encapsulate the aspirational nature of it. So those 2 items that Joe are concerned about, we could perhaps reword them to make them aspirational. But there will be more officers. There are going to be more academies, and this is aspirational. We have got to do something different in Oakland, and if we just base on what our current limitations are, we are never going to achieve the improvements that we need. Thank
Okay.
you.
Jesse, is there anybody else with their hands up? Is that a couple of comments? Anybody
Not
else?
that I can see.
Okay. One is that I think the emphasis on the CROs and the SARA process is absolutely critical for a number of reasons, and not the least of which is that it's really a scenario within which we're talking about the heart and soul of what I consider to be community policing, and that is the collaboration between the OPD and the community working on a mutually identified problem that they apply a specific process to. And so this is, in the ideal, you have a perfect scenario for building trust, building a collaborative relationship. So I think that's one thing that needs to be really, really emphasized. So I'm not tied to, I think somewhere in here, and I'm not sure exactly where, it's talking about that each CIO must have three operational, I don't know if operational is the right word, be working on three projects or three priorities. I'm not tied to that. We could change that to at least one. But I think the real value of the CRO is in their collaboration around specific mutually identified problems in a beat. So that's one. The other is that there has to be some sort of language in the policy that does not allow OPD to just drain off the CRO's time dealing with for example, patrol issues, crowd control issues. There's so many instances of CROs not even showing up to neighborhood council meetings. And so I think that the shift that I'm talking about is that the OPD has to see the value of the CROs in terms of their building the relationship via working on projects, via working on collaborative relationships, et cetera. And the value of that, in my opinion, really directly relates to the kinds of violence that we are experiencing in Oakland. It's these kinds of relationships that I see the CROs and the building of their trust and collaborative relationships in that will have the actual impact on the kind of violence that we're seeing. Because the question I have, and I haven't yet had an opportunity to pose it to the chief, he talks about that the community needs to help OPD, and it certainly I couldn't argue with that. My question is specifically, what are the ways that the community can help in terms of addressing the kind of violence that we're seeing in Oakland specifically? And I see whatever those specifics are as falling in the relationship that potentially can be built around dealing with SARA projects and the CROs and the community. So it's a long way of saying that I don't see enough value being placed on OPD on the time that the CROs spend in their beats. The other thing is that in terms of the 10%, again, I'm not tied to that, but there has to be a way that OPD begins to value the kind of time that CROs should be spending in their beats. And also, in terms of the beats, really the CROs should be building these relationships and focusing their time on the beats that really need their input, their efforts. And I'll give you an example. We've said for many, many years in Maxwell Park, we don't have the kinds of problems that Melrose, right next to us down here in the Melrose district, has. Their problems are far more serious than ours. So our CRO, if we've got a dedicated one, should be spending more time partnering with the CRO in 27X because their issues are far more serious than ours are. So that's where the emphasis should be going. And I'm glad to hear that in the Nest project that Joe was talking about. That was started several months ago. So I'll leave it at that. But I think that the overall, I think the emphasis should remain the same with some adjustments as I just mentioned. But the emphasis, I think, has to be on the CROs really putting their maximum efforts to the maximum extent possible on the beats that need their efforts the most. So I'm not so much concerned about, it has to be 10% and carrying 3 priorities. I'm not concerned about those. We can make those adjustments, but that emphasis has to be made and that importance has to be recognized. So I'll leave it at that. Creighton.
Thanks, Jose. I just wanted to uplift one of the points you made about CROs being siphoned off to conduct, other functions. And I think this has been one of the critiques of, the problem-solving officers, the CROs, since their inception. And I guess my question is for Lieutenant Febble. If we have this in the policy, why in the past have CROs been siphoned off, and how can we mitigate that or address that potentiality in the future? Because my understanding it has been in the policy where problem-solving officers are supposed to and CROs are supposed to focus on community tasks, but that hasn't been the reality. And how do we strengthen this policy to avoid that outcome after this policy is implemented? So that's my question for Lieutenant Febble.
That's a great question, sir. So I'll give you just a brief historic. So we run what we call an area command model. So we now, as of today, congratulations to East Oakland, we now have 6 districts. Each district has a captain, and that captain is responsible for a crime plan. So prior to Chief LaRon Armstrong, captains would very frequently combine their crime reduction team with their community resource officers to bolster their resources to fight violent crime. Because violent crime is of course, it's always been the department's priority, the sanctity of life, right? But in order to accomplish their, tasks and deliverables for reducing violent crime, the CROs would very frequently get sucked into CRT operations as arrest teams. It was very, very challenging, right? But Chief Armstrong recognized that is a very superficial response to dealing with violent crime. And so he developed a specialized unit, the Violent Crime Operations Center, which separated the CRTs from the CROs. I mean, we don't even work in the same buildings anymore. And as a result, I can speak for at least East Oakland. We did not operate a single CRT operation after that separation from there. But I agree, very problematic for many years. I was a CRO and been involved in CRO for over 6 years of my career, and we were very frequently pulled into those operations. Now, secondarily, sometimes special events or more critically mobile field force events for protests, the CROs often get doled out to those because they're the only resource left. We can't pull from patrol. And there's just not many people left to attend to those. So we become the primary on those. I will say this, Chief Armstrong and even Deputy Chief Mendoza, who's currently the commander of all of East Oakland, has made it known that they shall pull from other entities, the Violent Crime Operations Center, TAC units, all that stuff, before they pull a CRO into patrol. So to not be too long-winded, I think the problem has actually solved itself. And certainly the policy could reflect, I think, Chief Mendoza's and Chief Armstrong's sentiment, and that the CRO should be kind of the last people to draw from when necessary. But there will always be times, especially in times of unrest, that all resources will be necessary for certain events.
Great.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you, Lieutenant Febble. I wasn't, you mentioned the CRT restructuring before, but this longer detailed explanation was really helpful. And then I think it again goes back to the earlier question of whether or not enforcement should be listed as one of the roles and responsibilities, to Mariano's initial point. Given that it sounds like the structure doesn't require it, and the staffing limitations won't cause CROs to be engaged in traditional enforcement or patrol actions based on that restructure.
Well, I agree. We just we do exactly. We're very community resource oriented in the East. Under my direction. 50% of our, so every Wednesday and Thursday we have a month 15 community meetings. So minimally 50% of our time is just attending meetings and preparing for those meetings. We don't have very much time at all to engage in enforcement operations. The only time we actually get involved in enforcement operations in 2022 for my unit was when we were assisting community members with traffic enforcement around schools and in very problematic intersections in their neighborhood. But we did not engage in hardly any like direct, felony enforcement operations.
Jesse.
Two questions for the lieutenant based on what you said. Number one, is there some other policy that directs area commanders to not pull from CROs, but instead from other resources prior, or is that just a general understanding and directive from the chief?
Oh, you know what? That's a good question, sir. I'm sure it is doctrine. I could reach out to our publications lieutenant who could provide more clarity on that. I'll do that, sir, Mr. Turner. But it's definitely the chief has made it, and the deputy chief have made it very clear that CROs are not a immediately tangible resource. There should be other modes used before we pull community resource officers off the beat. We do assist patrol because our call response times have really become challenged lately, and every citizen deserves a police officer there when they need one in an emergency. And secondarily, we will assist in backfill for the desk at the Eastmont. And the reason why is that we have so many underprivileged, under-resourced folks in East Oakland, and they simply can't make it out to the West Oakland Police Administration building. So it's a top priority of ours to always have that resource available in the East for our citizens. So we have occasionally covered the desk as well.
Thank you. And then my second question is, you're getting you'll have 5 CROs. Let me ask it a different way. What is optimum staffing for CRO? What are optimum CRO staffing levels look like?
This is a great question. And it's something that really I had to meet with a lot of people and talk about. I wrote up essentially a memorandum to my deputy chief regarding, and this was in large discussion with Mr. DeVries, about 3 plausible models. And the model was full staffing is 16 CROs for the 15 beats. Secondarily, I did operational for what can 8 CROs do with 16 beats. And then my last one was 6 or fewer. And it gets pretty stark, when you get below 16. But to answer your question is, sir, if we had 16 CROs for the 15 beats, we can accomplish a lot.
And that's just for your area.
Indeed, sir. Yes. And then West Oakland, of course, it would break it. They would be the difference, and that would be 19 to cover the additional.
Got it. Appreciate it.
Jesse, anybody else have their hand up? Okay. A couple things. One in terms of being pulled off for crowd control, and this is just an aside, just for food for thought. If in fact there was more of a effort from the city and OPD to have community involvement in crowd control, contacting the people that are organizing the marches, protests, etc., I think there'd be less need for OPD involvement and less siphoning off of certainly of CROs, even if they're the last resort. So I am interested in seeing what Lieutenant Turner comes up with, Lieutenant Febble. The other thing is that can you speak more on the? I don't know if I heard you correctly, Lieutenant. On the you said that 50% of your time, CRO time, is spent in preparation for meetings. Can you speak on that a little bit more?
Yeah, sir. So just to put it into context, right now, this is just based on my current staffing of 5 CROs. So to cover all the NCs based on the 2022 projected schedule, we will average about 15 NC meetings per month. And so if you divide that up among 5 officers, and they're having to get the statistics, make sure that they're apprised of the community trends, and of course the crime trends in their area, it takes a significant amount of time. So it's not just, of course, the time that they're actually spending in the meetings, which typically take place between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., but they got to prepare for those meetings so they can intelligently answer citizens' questions. So that leaves them about 2 days, for the rest of the week, to get their work done and to get deliverables done from the community. So the one thing I do want to assure everybody is, because I don't want the disillusion of the CRO program. I think that would be extremely unfortunate. I just want people to know that it is our absolute priority, minimally, to maintain the presence at all needed NC meetings. And so I do think the policy should reflect that least and most importantly is that CRO should be tending the NC meetings.
Thank you, Lieutenant. I wanted to quickly go back to, go ahead, Creighton.
Thanks, Jose. Just wanted to respond to that last point, Lieutenant Febble, about the time spent on preparation for meetings. So, I've sat in, like most people here, have sat in on a number of NC meetings, and the recitation of statistics, while informative, I would imagine isn't as helpful to community as like actual on the ground projects. So I'm wondering, how we can think about, and this is something we're thinking about also at the CPAB level, how we can think about using CRO time more effectively, rather than just, coming to meetings and, going through the routine of, sharing the statistics, because that's not fun for the CRO. That's not necessarily beneficial for the community. And, how can we, optimize CRO time at meetings, and also CRO time more broadly, so that it's not spent just, putting together statistics, because that just doesn't seem to be the best use of their time, when they could be out doing fulfilling a number of projects that the community is asking for. So how we can potentially include that in the policy in further detail. I see that we're on that number 1 right there, so it discusses that, but how we can actually make sure that's implemented in practice, so meetings aren't just recitations of statistics, and are like maybe more focused on the actual updates of projects that are ongoing.
Great point, Creighton. So the reason why the CROs kind of roll into community meetings with this monolithic style is that the city wanted to have a universal pattern across the city that every NC could expect to get certain information. And so the CROs are delivering information based off that playbook. But I agree. I think this is where we can certainly grow. I remember Chief Armstrong, we had a risk management meeting. We busted out all these statistics, numbers. And he finally said, listen, guys, these are all numbers. Tell me what's really happening, right? Like, let's just keep it real. Tell me what's going on. So I agree. If we could put it in the policy that CROs should essentially portray their message to each community based on information that they need and that they want, and that you give them some wiggle room there, I think they're going to be a lot more productive. And let's just keep it real. We're police officers. We get this job, with a GED and a high school diploma. We're not data miners. That's just not our strength. So it is an inefficient use of our time. So I think we should allow the community to set the expectations on the information that they want to hear, so it doesn't become so monotone every meeting.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely agree. Thank you.
Thanks, Creighton. Mariano, and then Reggie.
Yeah, so in this section here, you know, the title sentence is, you know, the responsibility of CRO of problem solving is specific to, and then it goes into list the specifics, but problem solving activities, I think that, you know, this is where, you know, we can address some of the suggestions that Creighton and also Lieutenant Febo were referring to. So problem solving activities, you know, it's we can, CROs can, you know, at these meetings is perhaps, you know, give a report or a rundown on what that means, what their training was around problem solving, you know, what are the best practices, and then, you know, maybe talk about, you know, if there was 10 cases of, you know, neighborhood blight, you know, they created some issues where, you know, the officers had to be there and you know, maybe do some conflict resolution of some sort, you know, so there should be an evaluation of what worked, what didn't work, you know, what was the best approaches, and document it so that, you know, next time, you know, at one of these meetings, a resident comes up and says, you know, well, I have, you know, this neighbor that's constantly putting crap out in front of their yard, then immediately you can look at, well, this is the best approach. So problem solving doesn't become you know, reactive, you know, but it becomes something that, you know, can prevent from something to escalate. So I would, you know, include, you know, kind of expand that problem solving into, you know, review of, you know, what was the training that was provided for that activity, you know, and then what kind of evaluation takes place. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariano. Reggie.
Oh, excuse me. Lieutenant Frable, you mentioned earlier of a strategy or a model that you use in Oakland Police Department where captains in various districts have to report out to the command staff and others who are in the audience about what is that policy called?
You know, it's not a policy, sir. It's just it's standard in any, you know, private or government sector. It's just that captains, they author 90-day crime plans, and they have to have an intimate knowledge of their district, the crime trends that are going on, and then they have to create a crime plan in response to obviously achieve the chief's overall efforts in crime reduction. So every one of them will do their own, as they see fit, system. And in prior practices, you know, before that would frequently envelope significant use of their SRS teams, which included CROs.
That is structurally happens weekly, right? Out at the command center out in East Oakland, right?
Well, the crime plans, sir, they're developed for 90 days.
No, I'm not talking about the crime plans. I'm talking about, is there a meeting that occurs out at, let me ask it this way. Is there a meeting that occurs out at Eastmont Mall where the commanders come and sit in front of the command staff and they discuss their crimes in their district, the crime trends, and discuss their strategies on ameliorating those problems, and they're held accountable on previous statements they've made at previous meeting. Doesn't that still occur?
Indeed it does, sir. That occurs on Mondays.
Yes. What is that called?
That is called our Monday morning meeting.
Okay. But that is in law enforcement, isn't it true that is a strategy, is a way of attacking problems in large communities and would have different problems in large settings and even in small settings? What I'm getting at is that it seems to me that's how a community meeting ought to be run. And the police department knows just how to do that. They put the onus on the commander, the captain. You got catalytic converters being ripped off of neighbors' cars. You got a rash of burglaries, you got pets being stolen, whatever it is, it's up to the captain to know about these things, or the commander to know about these things, develop a policy, report out to his supervisors about what strategy is, and then subsequently come back and report on the progress, positive or negative, and they're held accountable on their success. So it seems to me that's how a community meeting ought to be run. That the community officer comes in, hears about the problems that's going on in the community, and a record is made. What strategy are you going to employ to ameliorate this problem? And then they're held accountable for the employment of that strategy, good or bad. But the onus is on the community resource officer to produce and to make results. But the authority rests with the community to tell them this is what's troubling us. This should be an easy way of running a community meeting. Coming out and say, in your district we had 13 burglaries, but last week we only had 8. Well, that's great for everybody except for those 8 people who had the burglaries. So statistics are minor. What's important is, do the people have a perception that their problems are being handled? Do they have a feeling or a perception that someone is listening to us and responding? Do we have someone we can hold accountable that we can call? And if things are not going good, do we have the authority to make some changes or ask for some changes?
Lieutenant?
Yeah, I agree, sir. I think that it, in its essence, it was designed for that, and that's why community members always have 3 priorities on the board, and and talk locally. But I feel like it's a very structured, rigid system. And I agree with you. I think if the community wants a more functional, just overt conversation about what's troubling them and how they want to proceed to assist in fixing it, I just think it makes for a better engagement with the community. Just an opinion.
It's problem-oriented policing. And so this is common knowledge in all of law enforcement, and we can employ this in the community. We could have a train the community on problem-oriented policing, problem solving, and then they will be empowered to know this is what this this meeting will not just be reduced to telling me about how many burglaries that happened, but we'll get down to the meat of the issue of whatever crime or problem that's affecting us. It may not even be a crime problem. The second thing I want to say is, or maybe ask this question: given our current situation, do we have to meet in person? Would it be more efficient and effective if these meetings were Zoomed? And so people who can't come out to the meeting or could always be plugged in to the meeting if they choose to, in their homes as they're on their computers, or maybe a hybrid. Maybe you meet and it can be broadcast to everyone in the neighborhood. What do you think about that?
You know what, sir? I already had actually thought about that, and that's what was my discussion with equipment. So I knew going into 2022, I was going to have very nominal staffing. So I reached out and I purchased each of my CROs a portable laptop that will allow them to do both in person as well as online community meetings, because I think that the goal is always to maximize participation so that we have the strongest message from each community and what exactly they want. I'm one of those weird guys. I love to meet in person, but I absolutely respect that a lot of people, especially during these very challenging times, want to attend, but they simply can't because of the restrictions. And so my team is prepared in 2022 to do a hybrid model, but my West Oakland partners, I don't think are. And so that's why I hope that we could leverage this policy to get technology to meet everybody's needs.
Well, I agree with that. Thank you.
A couple things. Any other hands up? Lieutenant, did you have another further comment?
Oh, no, thank you, sir.
Okay. Jesse, any other hands up that you can see? Um, One of the things that about, and we dealt with this at the police commission level. We asked the chief not to come to us with or spend time going through the stats, just to have those be provided to us. And we wanted to talk to the chief about what's actually going on. Back to the lieutenant's or the chief's, I should say, the lieutenant's recitation of what the chief wanted. The point being that I think that the whether or not the CRO is there virtually or in person, the stats can be always given to the neighborhood council that they're assigned to in advance, so that people have a chance to look at it, look at the stats before the meeting, and that way that there's no or little time spent on actually going through the statistics. But I think to Reggie's point, it's really more a question of not whether if there was a reduction of the burglaries from 13 to 8 or whatever. It's more so what are you going to do about that? So that can be the and should be the orientation of the CRO's time, is what the strategy is going to be employed to continue a trend, either up or down. I should say down. But what are the strategies going to be employed? And that should be that would be the real value of a CRO report. So let me leave it at that. And I thought I saw Creighton's hand up. Creighton?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to just add on to the point of, the importance of neighborhood council meetings being community led and community directed. So in the event that one neighborhood council, prefers a certain approach to, how they want to conduct their meetings, they should be allowed to take that approach. And if a neighborhood council, wants to focus CRO time on X initiative or wants to structure the CRO's involvement in a meeting in a specific way, then they should, be allowed to do that. And I think that's where, with respect to this policy, we just have to think about not being too prescriptive in terms of how, and I don't think we are, but just not being too prescriptive on how CRO time is, how CRO participation is in terms of neighborhood council meetings, and really let the direction of CRO involvement be at the hands of the community. And I think that's consistent with what everybody has said so far.
I certainly agree. Yeah, as we all know, the neighborhood councils really are a wide spectrum in a number of ways. So yeah, I think they definitely need to have that kind of flexibility. I'm looking at what do we got? We got a little after 6. I want to respect people's time. If there's no other burning issues we have to deal with, I think we've identified this question of what are the kinds of changes, additions or deletions in the policy that we should propose to each other in terms of this, what Joe DeVries was saying about the limitations. And the limitations versus what our expectations can and should be, regardless of the staffing levels. So I think that's certainly a question, a big question that we need to wrestle with. Again, my inclination is that there are a couple places that we can make some changes. For example, that the specifying 3 priorities per CRO. I'd be happy with just saying, at least 1, just to give some flexibility there. But I think the real essence of this is determining what it is we want the CROs to do. And this relates directly to one of Reggie's comments about what is the efficiency of the CROs, and how can we up that? And I would underline, my previous comment about that. I think the what through the policy that should be the emphasis is the value again of the CROs and their relationship with the assigned neighborhood council in terms of how they collaborate with the neighborhood council and the community in general around community identified problems. And there's a prescribed process of the SARA process.
It's a SARA process, right?
That in itself is, I think, the real heart and soul of what has to happen in community policing. And I think OPD needs to shift its orientation more toward valuing that whole process of what the CRO does and how they do it. So I see the lieutenant's hand up. Lieutenant.
Hey, very quickly, Mr. Dorado, for everybody's time. Something that we've talked about a lot, and one of the big things I've always had a strong agreement with you on was there is a bit of a silo from CROs on projects that are successful, projects that are unsuccessful, and the sharing of that knowledge across the board. There's some reasons for that. Perhaps an idea I could float to everybody here. Quarterly might be a little bit of a challenge, but minimally, we could possibly build in every 6 months, all the CROs should collaborate together at a round table and talk about the projects that were successful, unsuccessful, and why they were, an in-person meeting, so that everybody has that first person back and forth knowledge of what worked and what didn't work. And that should be in collaboration with our NSCs as well. What do you guys think of that idea?
I certainly think that would be a really good meeting of the minds, because again, that kind of sharing of the knowledge within CROs, I think, is invaluable, because certainly there can be any number of ways that the CROs are gonna learn from each other, and particularly if this whole process can be done in conjunction with the community, maybe in a separate meeting. But again, I think that the meeting of the minds around what are successful projects and what are unsuccessful and why, I think could be an invaluable procedure, valuable meeting to really engage in. I'd be in favor of it. What do other people think? Reggie?
I think that's a good idea. I think anything we do to get beyond the attitude that we can't do anything is good with me. And I think that we ought to try multiple strategies, and many of them are going to fail. And when they fail, we don't get on each other's case, but that we just say, hey, let's try another way of doing it, and keep moving. But the foundational thing is that Oakland Police Department has to change. It has to change. And these little responsibilities and authorities have to shift from Oakland Police Department to the communities. That's what community policing is all about. And people who are against community policing, that's what they don't want to give up. And so let's be frank with one another. I'll end with this. I said it, my last little paragraph or two. There's never been a police agency that's ever been up to staff. And they will never say that they were up to staff. I've never heard of it, and it's never been done. If they can do something successful, they don't mention it. If they cannot do something, staffing. So we don't look at that. You got to play with the people you got here on the bench. And that's who you got. Tell me what you're doing with them. Thank you.
All right, everybody. We certainly have a lot to think about. Oh, I'm sorry, Mariano. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I also like that idea that Lieutenant Febo put out about meetings and evaluating what worked, what didn't work. One of the key things should be also in evaluation is, how are we expanding? How are these CROs, neighborhood councils, expanding, a larger inclusion of their areas, of their neighborhoods? Are we dealing with the same percentage of engaged folks? Are we seeing the same faces? Are we reaching out to those who may not be participating, who are not participating because they think that their voices don't count? So that should be one of the critical points of evaluation. How are we expanding into the larger areas? In my neighborhood, not in my neighborhood, in my block, there's about 40 houses. And we do an annual, or we used to do an annual night out, and we would get probably 40% of the houses that would participate. And so after a couple of years, we said, how can we get more folks involved? So you need to get creative about that. So that should be the key thing, because if you're dealing with the same folks, we're not doing our job. Thank you.
Thanks, Mariano. Creighton.
Yes, I'm all about, all in favor and all very much in support of, knocking down walls and not working in silos. Jose, you know that in our last CPAB meeting, we had neighborhood council town hall where we had a number of neighborhood council leaders, including yourself, share some of the big projects, big developments over the course of the year. And as I just kind of hear everybody's comments, it sounds like CROs would really benefit from being part of that discussion too. And, participating either both in neighborhood council meetings, but also in CPAB meetings as, one of the venues where many different groups across Oakland, many different neighborhood councils across Oakland are able to participate and gather. And it seems that CROs should be part of that conversation as well. So just wanted to raise that point. But I missed part of Lieutenant Febel's comment on gathering CROs. But if I understood, the gist of it, I think it would be very, very beneficial to kind of get all the CROs in a room with the NSCs and police commission, CPAB, community members, NC leaders, and kind of hear about what some of the best practices are, what some of the challenges are, so that we can really understand from the CRO perspective, okay, what's working, what's not, and then the CROs can hear from the community members as well to see what what has worked, what they want, and how they can collaborate better. Because at least from my experience, I have not had the opportunity to interface with a large contingent of CROs. It's usually on a one-to-one basis, so I don't have a good sample size of what's worked, what hasn't, and what the general sentiment is from CROs who are on the ground on a daily basis. So I would love to be part of that conversation, and would support setting that up.
Great. I just want to say that CPA, I couldn't agree with you more, Creighton. The CPAB is going in a wonderful direction under your leadership, and with the efforts of a lot of the members on the board. So yeah, I think that certainly would be a fruitful conversation that would benefit us all in terms of community policing. So I couldn't agree with you more. Any other comments? Again, I want to respect everybody's time. We're at about 11:15 or so. Again, I think we have quite a bit to think about, and certainly we can talk about it with each other. But I think the real question here is how and where do we allow some flexibility if we think that's warranted, given the staffing levels of OPD at the moment. So unless I'm out of line, I'm going to say that this to be the focus of our comments and additions, deletions, from now to the next meeting in 2 weeks. If there's no other comments, oh, Creighton, you still have your hand up? Do you have another comment?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's from the previous comment. I'll bring it down. Thank you.
All righty. So I'm going to go ahead and thank Jesse for all his work and putting this together. You know, what he's doing is just invaluable. And Brenda, your time again is certainly valuable. And of course, you know, all the community folks, you know, Reggie, Mariano, certainly the lieutenant, Paula. So all the folks that joined us today, Creighton. You know, certainly appreciate all your time, Mike. Everybody that made it, put their time in today, really appreciate it. So let's do this between now and the next meeting in 2 weeks. Focus on this question of what, if any, modifications we need to do on what we've got so far, in light of what Joe DeVries and Lieutenant said. And also what kinds of additions can be made in terms of really solidifying what we think the CRO should be doing, certainly in terms of efficiency, at least. So if there aren't, oh, Mariano, go ahead.
Yeah, just for my benefit, maybe for others also, is where did we do? How far did we get on this document? Can we just point that out, so just so I'll know where to begin for next time?
If I'm not mistaken, Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're pretty much still in terms of working on the CRO general and specific responsibilities. And that's where the comments came in from the lieutenant and from Joe DeVries. Yes.
I tend to agree. I think most of the comments were broader based, sort of what general priorities we have, as opposed to how those may be implemented. So I would say the majority of our focus was in this general roles and responsibilities section, with a little bit of sidetracking, but very valuable conversation nonetheless.
So I would just wind up the meeting with, again, asking people to take a look at the, Mariano, do you have another comment?
No, sorry.
Okay. So I would ask people to peruse the additions to the document that Jesse has put in regarding our conversation. Certainly give it your best thoughts, and based on that, go ahead and please make any proposals, any additions, deletions to the document that you think are warranted. But please spend some time going through this and giving it some thought. And again, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it on a Saturday morning that you take the time to do this. It's just really critical, and hopefully we in the near future will be able to hammer something out that we can take to the full commission, and hopefully that will pass without having to go to council. So again, that directly relates to Lieutenant Febble's participation. So any parting shots or any parting comments, burning issues or announcements?
What I'll say is I will.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I wanted to ask Reggie if he got hacked, because I got some crazy emails from you.
Oh, no.
Okay, never mind.
Crazy emails from Jose?
No, from Reggie.
For Reggie.
Oh, from Reggie.
Right, something about photographs or something. I didn't even open it because, so sorry. Sorry,
Your
Jesse.
password.
Reggie,
we can't hear you.
I don't even know if I have your email address. I didn't know I had even had it. Oh man. I apologize.
That must have been another Reggie Lyles.
Oh my God. Not another one.
What I will do is I will take a lot of these comments, synthesize them, and do a red line tracked edit into the document so everyone can see what changes are being made. Give me a couple of days to make sure so that they're all in there. And we'll make comments or we'll talk about it in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Great. That's,
I have, can I have one comment?
go ahead, Brenda.
Mike, I love your background. Okay. It's so peaceful. All right, I'm done. Okay, everybody, thank you all. for
What date is
participating.
in 2 weeks? Does anybody know that off the, so I can put in my calendar now? Will that be what?
It's the second, the 5th.
Okay, February 5th.
Okay, same
El
time,
5 de
same date.
febrero.
Hmm?
El 5 de febrero.
De Ferrero.
Is that a good day to do it? Should we do it on that day or not?
No, yeah, I think that's
Okay.
fine.
Oh,
Yeah,
he's just speaking Spanish for
Yeah.
us.
Yes. Jose,
yes,
is there any way we can talk offline? I don't have your
yes, sir.
I don't have your email address, but you may have
Yeah,
mine.
absolutely. If you want to write it down, it's pretty simple. It's just my name.
Okay.
Jose A. Don't forget the A. Dorado 48 at Gmail.
48 at Gmail. Thank you, sir.
Right. All right. Thank you. And
Bye, folks. See you guys in 2 weeks.